Ooh,
All right. Well, this is an exciting day. You know why?
yes, it is.
This is the first episode of Mantegrity. So excited, so nervous, so everything. There's all the feels right now. But I'm here with my beautiful friend who supported me, who is so smart, so much insight, and I'm so excited to have a open, vulnerable, fun, silly conversation about who knows what right now, whatever's on our heart right now. But um, this is Renata Barletto. I'll add the sound
Hi.
effects later. Who knows? We'll see. We'll
Clapping
see.
effect. Thank you, Natul. Yes, my name is Renata. I am a transformational life coach with a focus on dating and intimacy, and I'm really excited to be here. It's a literal blessing to be a part of your first podcast show.
Yes, and I'm honored. I'm honored, and I have a lot on my heart. Um, but I wanted to start with one question, and it's a very simple question. And the background is I feel like there's a lot of things that get posted on social media that are intended to be jokes, intended to be funny, and we don't know how deep they penetrate. Um, like we don't really know how people receive them, especially men, right? And so one thing that does get posted a lot, and you even hear it from some of your women friends, is all men suck,
Mm.
you know? Um, so I wanted you to take a second to kind of explain how that hits you, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's a tough one, and we do see it a lot. I I have the amazing opportunity to answer this question now in a completely different headspace and mind space and heart space, as opposed to how I could have answered this or might have answered this maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. Which would have been like, yeah, they do. Um, and yeah, it's a rough one. I I really discourage anybody that I know from using this kind of language or that kind of jargon. And to be honest, it's really challenging sometimes. Social media is a really wonderful tool. And at the same time, even knowing what I know and looking through the lens I look through now of a different elevated mindset, it's still challenging to see that stuff, even as a woman. When I see that language, I go straight into coach mode and I want to reach out to those women and be like, wait, stop, don't say that. Um, the biggest thing for me with that comment is that what you speak into existence is what you attract into existence, right?
Mm,
It's like what you say is what you create. That's how source works. That's how the universe works. And even saying that in a joking way, you're still calling it forth, right? If you live by the phrase, all men suck, or what's the other one people say a lot? There's plenty of fish in the sea, but the sea is trash, or like the sea is filled with garbage or
I've heard
something like
something.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like, okay, then exactly that's what it exactly is. If that's your reality, then that's the reality. And um, let's be honest, like that's just simply not true. Are you saying that your brothers are trash? Are you saying that your father or your male teachers or your coworkers or your male friends, or every man you've ever dated. Some people may feel that way, but is are trash. Like for me, I know that's simply not the reality. There are so many wonderful men in my sphere, in my existence, right? Like there's one of them right in front of me on the camera right now, right? Like to say exactly. Look at him, ladies. Fucking perfection, right? So to say that, and when we're talking about like we're obviously talking about their character, like the way that they're showing up in romantic relationships, and so I understand that that could be the argument there. Like Renata, well, we're talking specifically about that, but it's just too broad of a thing to say, and it's obviously not true. I even the men in my life who have hurt me or relationships that didn't go well or they maybe ended poorly, even those men are not trash men. They are not horrible human beings. um Misguided, maybe hurting themselves, maybe struggle to communicate, maybe not in touch with their emotions. These are phrases I would choose to use instead of like trash or horrible, or all men. it's 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 reinforcing a narrative that is completely dividing the sexes, the genders. When like it's just taking us farther and farther away from the end goal, which is like we want to be here. We want to be like, balanced and working together and masculinity and femininity, coming together to create more love and more connection in the world. And by saying that, you're inherently doing the opposite. If you're looking for a good man in the world to date, or even be friends with, and you're saying all men suck, you're moving the opposite direction of your intended goal. So that was a lot of feedback, but that's like just the beginnings of where my mind goes when I hear that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the biggest thing I heard was there was a shift in perspective, from 4 years ago to now. So, from anyone who is not there right now, like what was the conversation like 4 years ago? I think you mentioned things like this person's not communicative, this person's not emotionally available, this person is like what was that situation like and what was the conversation
Before I was healed,
before you
before I was this
before you
before I
found
was this
yes,
perfect angelic
yes,
figure of
right.
elevated consciousness.
Yeah,
um I still think that I chose not to say like everyone sucks, like all men suck. I think I still was kind of on that wave, but I might have thought it. I might have internalized it, like I'm never gonna get out of this loop, of dating bad men. And it's at the end of the day, it's yourself that's attracting those patterns, but that's another conversation. Um, what it looked like, Matul, is finding empathy. And I'm not saying to make excuses for someone who might have, done something, but at that time, when I wasn't taking accountability for what I was attracting and for the role I was playing. So it's first of all like a bit of a victim story back then, right? Like this always seems to happen. Men are terrible, men are liars, men are cheaters, right? It was kind of like a bit of that,
right,
instead of looking at like why is this what's happening in my world? What's showing up for me here? So it's a victim story to start. And then I would try to find empathy, like I said. Why is this person behaving this way? Now, what I know now is like it really doesn't matter because it's whatever's going on with them and has nothing to do with yourself. Um but yeah, it looked like empathy. It looked like trying to understand that person's point of view, trying to see like why maybe there was hurt there, why there was that kind of behavior, why that person was showing up in that way. Um so that I could better understand or not excuse the behavior, but just have more compassion for it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I follow up question, which is like, did you ever find out why they showed up that way? Was there any relationship where you reached out to someone like, hey, you're hurting me in XYZ way, and I just want to know what's going on, you know?
Sometimes you get the answers and sometimes you never do.
Okay.
And sometimes people have enough self-awareness to be able to communicate it. Sometimes they don't, and maybe the answer presents itself to you later down the line. Yes, in some cases, no in others. So, and then what you end up doing, which is a dangerous game, is filling in the gaps yourself, and you do not want to do that because
Right.
then you're like, what's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? Or like I remember with one ex in particular, it was like, okay, he is either like just so emotionally unhealthy and like couldn't handle this and shrunk into himself and really all the things he said about like going through a hard time, like either that was true or he's a literal sociopath. And then you're like, you know, you're like, you're trying to come up like how I will never know. I will never know the reason for some people.
Yeah.
Yes, though some of them, I have an open line of communication with a lot of people from my past, and I try to maintain healthy relationships with the people who that makes sense with, who have become friends. And yes, to the level of self-awareness that they have, yeah, they've communicated. One in particular, my ex from back in my 20s, we've had several conversations over the years, and one of them for him, he apologized and said, you showed up as a partner and wanting to make it work, and thought I was trying, because again, I wasn't really showing up as the person that you deserved. And his reasons at the time, um, which, yeah, definitely don't make him evil, but he was just struggling to become the man that he wanted to be, right? And it's like perfectly designed for this conversation, actually.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, yeah, he had a lot of catching up to do in his life. He's a little older than me, but he had been through some stuff that had set him back, and he was trying to do it all. He was trying to get his money right, trying to get his mind right, trying to work on his healing and also his growth at the same time, which, as we know, is hard work. Um, and maintain a romantic relationship with myself, who was also unhealed at the time and very needy, for lack of a better term, like emotionally, like dependent. That's a better way of saying it. Like emotionally dependent on someone in an unhealthy way. Like I was looking to him to fulfill my happiness and those things. So so he acknowledged that, and he said, he's like, I was not able to do both at the same time, and where I dropped the ball was with you in the relationship because I was so focused on getting myself to where I wanted to be. And when I look back on that, nothing about that is evil. Nothing about that makes that man like trash. In the moment of that breakup, I was in a very unhealthy place, and it was like it broke my world. That was my first love, my first serious relationship, first time living with someone, all that. And yeah, I'm like, why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to us? Like, fight
Yeah,
for it, right? When I
right.
look back now, and even like a year after that, I was able to see it, but it took like a year to really. I was going through a lot, but it took a year at that point in time when my maturity and emotional maturity and intelligence to figure that out. That like, oh, like this made sense, right? He needed that. We would never have grown into like a power couple or like the best versions of ourselves in that because he literally like he wasn't able to, he wasn't capable at that time. And to be honest, good for him for calling it out and seeing it. I know it wasn't an easy breakup for him either because it was the same for me. I would never have grown into the person that I became after that while whilst in it. Like you
Yeah.
could not, you can't see what you can't see. You're in this bubble. So, so yes, I did get some answers, and from other people I've gotten other answers, but that one was really significant.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think what I heard was that this man was trying to do the best he could to better himself in financial ways, in personal ways, in mental ways, and it took away from the relationship. In that, what he didn't give you attention, or that, like, what did that look like? You know?
Mm. Yeah, it was, yes, I was getting probably less attention than I wanted.
Yeah,
Less less intimacy. So I don't
yeah,
even mean like physicality,
yeah,
but um the kind of connected intimacy that I wanted. So love, affection,
yeah,
right? And at the time we chalked that up to we just have different love languages.
yeah,
Like I'm just an affectionate person and he's not.
yeah,
So I would try to dim that version, that part of myself down and not ask for it or need it. And and as time went on, of course, that became very problematic. That is not the answer ever. But I think that he does have the capacity for affection, and I think it was just the misalignment of like where he was. He was unable to deliver it. And so my craving it and asking for it and expecting it made him like pull away further from that.
yeah,
But inherently it's not because yes, he had some work to do on healing his heart and healing his ability to show up in that way. Um, but it was all the other stuff that was going on that was making him like, of course, just not show up as his best version of himself in that way, I think too, right?
yeah.
Like again, he had a lot of healing to do. So it's not because I wanted to cuddle more or be told, I love you more out loud or um, whatever you deem for me is like I'm a physical touch person. So just like cuddling or like just have sharing intimate moments is not because I was asking for it that it was like, oh God, it's because what was going on within him. And he acknowledges that too, right? Like he's just like, I wasn't able to show up for you in those ways. Um, and it's not because I didn't deserve it or because I was asking for too much. It was because of where his head was at.
And that was a conversation that was going on in your head, like something's wrong with me, and that's why I'm not getting this affection and love that I want from him.
Probably deep down, but I don't know that I was acknowledging that
Yeah.
because yeah, you definitely internalize that, but then you make it their problem
Hmm.
as you're internalizing it.
Yeah, yeah,
So it was more like, why are you an asshole? Like,
yeah.
well, yeah,
Good
yeah.
enough.
It was more like, why can't you show up for me in this way? Why don't do you not love me enough?
Yeah,
Like, what is wrong with you that you can't just hold me, hug me, like whatever the case was, right?
yeah,
Um, and then yes, of course, you then you internalize that too. Like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not hot enough anymore? Am I not like, am I not lovable? Worthy,
yeah,
right? Which is all, of course, bullshit stories. But if that person's not giving you a reason, they're like, no, like I'm still attracted to you. No, I still love you. It's like, it's this like disconnect. Like you don't know your heart, they don't understand theirs, and you're both
yeah,
like trying to communicate, and no one fucking has an open line. Am I allowed to
yeah.
swear on here? No one has an open line of
Fuck yeah.
okay, of love. So it's just it's miscommunication when you really
Yeah.
don't understand yourself and in someone else. It's very difficult, very difficult way to be.
There's so much opening up to me here, and there's so many ways I want to go, but I lit up when you said asshole
Mhm.
because this is a word that has a dual meaning when women say it, right? sometimes it's like he's such an asshole, and sometimes he's such an asshole, you know. And it's the whole like nice guys finish last thing for me, you know, where it's like I wish I was more of an asshole sometimes because
Mhm.
women like assholes sometimes, you know, and not that they like being mistreated, right? It's more teasy, right? But I think a lot of men internalize it like I'm too nice, so I gotta be mean in order to get women, you know? Like, what do you, has that ever occurred to you? Has that, I mean,
Yeah.
what does that
No,
mean?
yeah, that
Yeah.
like, so, uh, this is gonna be, yeah, this topic, I don't believe, I don't believe in it. I know it's real. It's real, but it only exists in an unhealed bubble. Like, yes, of course I'm familiar with that. And I lived that way for years of my life.
Yeah.
And I will never, ever do it again. Ever. So now, now we could get into this. Like, this is a good one. So I could get into this on a few different levels because there's a big difference between a man who's very clear on what he wants and has a dominant presence,
Yeah.
not like an overbearing, like that kind of, but like a healthy, dominant masculine presence. That is very different than like, oh, you're such an asshole. Like the whole like back in the day was like, oh, like if he, yeah, like keep her on the hook, waiting to text her back, like those kind of things, like kind of being a little bit of a dick sometimes because like girls like bad boys, like that only shows up when someone is unclear on their own self-worth. And as someone who lived in that space as a woman for a while, yes, you are going to attract those kind of people and you're going to allow that kind of behavior. I genuinely now believe that you have to show up as you are with like a good heart, and that's how you win. Like I don't believe that like nice guys finish last. I do believe that there is a difference between being nice and being, I don't want to use the word
No, use
soft is
it.
what's
Use
okay.
the
Okay, the
word
word soft.
pussy, use the word doormat, use the
No,
word
yeah,
like,
doormat or soft. I was
yeah,
gonna say there's a difference between
yeah,
being nice. Like
yeah,
someone would be like, "Oh, Renata, like I don't know why people like you, like
yeah,
you're so nice." I'm like, "Don't
yeah,
don't ever call me nice." I've said that multiple times. I'm like, "I'm kind. I have a good heart. I'm a good person." But to me, like I don't even like the word nice because yeah, it's like what does that mean? Right? Oh, he's so nice. Like exactly. Like,
yeah,
"Oh yeah,
yeah,
he's just like too nice." Is he
yeah,
really not too nice?
yeah,
Like who doesn't want someone who's like kind?
yeah,
But is it just like he's just a little like exactly like pushover,
yeah,
doormat soft. Like let's
yeah,
not associate being confident, firm, or like in your self-worth with being an asshole. Like
yeah,
we're associating different words here, right? In my opinion. So it's like yes, there is such thing as being like too nice or too soft, not nice, but you know what I'm saying, too soft.
yeah,
And that's a different thing because I think this is controversial as well, but for me, I do believe to some degree in like roles to some
yeah,
degree. I'm not saying I want to stay home, raise babies, cook and clean and have no checking account. That's not what I'm saying. But I do believe that we have energy as men and women that balances itself and complements itself. And for me, I'm a very strong woman. Like I have some power behind my voice, my actions, right? As someone earlier today called me intimidating. I'm like, what? No, me? Ooh, me? No. Um, and crave, I can't I can't have someone who is more gentle or more soft than me as my partner because I crave, this is just for me personally, I crave a level of like groundedness, firmness, um, solidness, um, that's like above mine because it helps to like challenge me in some ways. Um, I won't deep dive into the specifics on that, but
Deep dive.
when you are executing as a really strong woman, especially a single, like I do everything for myself, right? And so the ability to be soft, I have to find time for it. I have to make, not to make, but I get to create opportunities for that in my life now, right? But it took a long time to learn that. And so when a strong man in his healthy masculinity comes in and steps in and can help take some of those burdens off my plate in one way or another, it is like I fall in love with that shit. Like I'll never forget the first time I felt like submitting, for lack of a better term, to a man. And I'll never I literally, I love like intellectual debate. We were in a debate about something at both Aquarius. So like, we love that shit, like deep conversations about whatever. And I'll never forget wanting to continue to argue a point, and I literally shut the fuck up, and my brain went, you know, maybe he's right. Just let him have that one. And I was like, said that. Like, what was
Wow.
that? And that's just like that seems normal to probably a lot of people, but for me, that was not, you know me, and that's one of my things is like being right, like
Yeah,
having to explain, get the last word,
yeah,
and this was years ago, and I remember being like, oh, like, and then that continued on this pattern of like he just held space where I was able to like in other ways just like let him kind of take the lead. And I know there's a lot of mixed reviews on these kinds of polarizing topics of men like being leaders and protectors and providers, but for me personally, I do benefit from a man that kind of like fits in role. It's not someone who's like aggressive or someone who's an asshole or someone who ever treats me like shit. That's not what it's about. I've even dabbled in like some understandings about dom and sub dynamics, and like it follows this same stream of consciousness of like the dom in the situation like holding space for the sub to be feeling safe and cared for and protected and whatever. So yeah, so to me, like I said, the point of what I was just all of that to say is that like nice, it depends how you define the term. There's definitely such a thing as being like too not firm enough in your self-worth. But there's nothing wrong with like being kind, going above and beyond. Like I say this, and I also don't believe in simping. Like if I hear one more person be like, "Oh, he's a
oh my
simp," I'm
god.
like,
Yeah,
what the fuck? Like he's a simp. Why? Because he
yeah,
buys her flowers every week? Because he opens the door for her? Because he loves her? That shit is like that's great. Normalize simping. That's called care. That's called showing up for your woman. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, people are confused, Matul. I'm so sick of this. This is why, like, yeah, I can't wait to start my podcast in a few months because it blows my mind. It blows my mind that that's like a thought process. And I'm like, adult women love that. If someone is like, ew, like, don't do that stuff for me, they are not fully living in their like true femininity, their full self-worth. Like, if you want a boy, just say that. Like, if you want someone who treats you poorly, just say that. Right? Like, so there's a dichotomy there. Um, but the nice should not equate to like pushover. It should equate to kind, and strength, and standing in your strength should not equate to like being an asshole or like being a fucking douchebag alpha bro. Um, there's a balance and like a crossover in there. Um, that that has to find its way into social media and like mainstream society.
It, again, man, think there's so much, and what you'll learn about me is my brain is like 80% um like pop culture references, 10% is like, okay, like I'll think about this and that and we'll figure it out. And 10% is like, let me make this heart go so he doesn't die. So when you said simp, I just thought back the first time I saw that word and I was like, oh, that's short for Simpsons, right? Like, I was like, I had no fucking idea what that was. I was like, why are these women hating on the Simpsons? And then that's my fucking boomer ass too. Except I'm a millennial, elder millennial. That's
That's okay. All my Gen Z friends, they say boomer too. Yeah, it's
yeah.
embarrassing.
But
Embarrassing.
I wanted to get back to this. So there was a lot you said there, and you used the word a man showing up in his healthy masculinity,
Hmm.
and that's the crux of this whole podcast, right? Like everyone is going to have a different definition of what masculinity is, right? And I think why I told you to go deeper, you were gonna stop. You were gonna be like, I don't want to go down that path, is because I think single men really listen to like what single women have to say about what they're attracted to, and it's just like always like, especially on social media, like when women put that stuff out there, it's like okay, then it becomes like a checklist of like things that I have to become, right? And so it just it kind of triggered me because I was just like I was I was conflicted. I was like, should I like listen to this and like try to like make this part of my checklist as masculinity, and like as I get more women on the podcast, like figure out what that is, and then I'm like, no, I need to like create my own definition of what masculinity is and what attractiveness is, right? But it's hard because it's just like when you look at someone like you and other like beautiful women on social media, it's like, okay, I'm just gonna like listen to what they want and then become that, you know? Um, and I don't know if I'm the only one that thinks like that, but I'm pretty sure I'm not, right? Like it's probably a
Probably not.
bunch of
Yeah.
men that are just like, yeah, that's what it's gonna be. So what I wanted to dive into is healthy masculinity. Like when a man shows up in healthy masculinity, what does that look like to you? And
Yeah. First of all, thanks for sharing that. I feel that that's pretty vulnerable and it's a really unique perspective for me as a female because it makes sense. And it's also like, oh, you guys are listening to what we're saying? Like, are you sure? Like, I figured you guys were just like
oh
doing, yeah, yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. And I can imagine the overwhelm that must come in because there are so many different opinions and perspectives. Even if we just talk about something as simple as what to do for a first date, if you were
yeah,
to poll 50 women right now, like, well, it depends on the like where they're from, the age group, like there's so many different factors. But literally we could go back and forth about that something so simple as that, right? Like, oh, a coffee date's perfect because it's fast, quick, and like I can decide if there's a connection and then we can move on. Ew, a coffee date is cheap. Don't invite me to coffee. What is this, an
yeah,
interview? Like,
yeah,
and I see both sides and I've
yeah.
said both things. Like, oh my
Wow.
God.
Yeah,
Oh, like it's crazy. Oh, a gym date, like I'm like, hell yeah, that's easy, quick. Like we're sweaty. There's no like bullshit. There's no drinking involved. You got to see the person in like a weird, awkward moment and like just
yeah,
go through it, see their work ethic, da 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 da. blah blah blah. Like a gym date, again, like cheap, like we don't get to talk. I don't want to be bothered during my workout. I want to focus, like different, a lot of different perspectives. So how it's just interesting because I'm like, oh, you guys are like taking all of this in, and it's completely, and then you've got like the Andrew Tates of the world, and then you've got like all
Yeah.
the other men also like stuff, like saying stuff.
Yep.
Um, and it's part of why I got into what I'm getting into, because I want to be able to help everyone, with their visions and stuff. But as far as the dating coaching, it's like, yeah, I feel like young men are specifically like, if you're going through this in your 30s in these thought processes, like imagine with the 20 somethings who haven't even like held long-term healthy relationships yet, like what they must be also thinking.
Right.
It's overload. You've got TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, like, and anyone can get access to a more, like,
Right. Yeah.
what? It's a scary world. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
Um, and to answer your question, um, also, side note, can you hear the background noise that's going on now with the dogs?
It's
Okay,
like dead silent.
it's amazing. Great.
It's just
You're gonna have to
you
edit
and your
that part.
angelic voice. That's it.
Yo, for real? Like, sorry, another portion you can edit out here, but I am literally gonna look into, there's like apps for voiceover reading, like for
Yeah.
people who read for books, and
Yeah.
like some spicy like book talk stuff. And there's like apps for that. And I'm gonna look into seeing if I can, because a couple people have been like, you have a great voice. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Cool.
You
So
should.
anyways, so yeah, so I appreciate you sharing that, because again, like that's a really good perspective. As someone who is not a man, to realize kind of like, oh wow, you guys are dealing with a major influx of stuff. And to answer your original question, so again, this is so subjective, and I want to have that said. It's important that that's said, because not every woman feels the same way that I do about this,
Right.
and I know that doesn't help your cause. So you're like,
Right.
well, like it's confusing, but you even said, right, everyone's gonna have a different thought and opinion on this, and I want to have that said. Like my definition of this, first of all, it evolves. It's ever changing. Like I've been surprised by men that I've dated who have shown me something different, and so I don't like it to be too rigid. And also my definition is different from the woman sitting next to me, right? So
Sure.
for me, purpose is a big one. So a man that's like in his purpose, I feel like it's one of men's like driving forces. So knowing that he, or seeing that he has purpose and a drive outside of himself, I guess, or like, yeah, like other than just like waking up and going into his job and like coming back and paying bills and watching Netflix. We're built for more, and women are very powerful beings as well, but men are like their role is to be the purposeful drivers. Um, so that's something that I look for, and something that really, really lights me up. Um, I want to get into protector provider,
Yeah.
because that's that's another big one for me. Um, and I think that they have also become conflated, if that's the right word, or like completely polarizing for sure. But also there's a lot of confusion around it. Or in my opinion, it's become messy. Um, The protector provider is not necessarily like a 6'4" dude that deadlifts 500 pounds, owns tons of guns, and makes $300,000 a year. Like, I think people are confused. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't date that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
However,
Right. Right.
however, however,
Wait, which
that is
part of
not
it? The $300,000 or the guns
All of it,
or the,
all of it,
all of it.
all of it,
You want
all of it,
all
all
of
of
it.
it, all of it. I live in Florida. Like I'm down with guns, you know, like we're fine with guns here. Um, yeah, yeah. I want to live on like a, you know, a compound someday. So, you know, we're gonna have to have some guns, and there won't be anyone to fend off, but we might be doing some hunting. Um, God, I know. So, and those and the lifting thing, well, that's whatever. So hold on, let me just go back. So, um, it's that's it's again, it's subjective to each person, right? It's a mentality
Yeah.
for me. And I've tried to explain this to people. Being a provider does not mean that you make X amount of money.
Yeah.
It does not mean that I want everything. I want you to pay to get my nails and hair done and buy me cars and let me sit home again, like, you know, raising your babies. And it might mean that for some people. And some men want that. And that's for me, it's just the desire to want to take care of your family. And that may look like your dog. That may look like your future wife or your girlfriend and your dog. That may be 18 children and your partner. That may mean your mother, your father, your kids, your wife, you know, like whatever it means. It's the desire to want to care for those people, to put them in a situation to want for nothing. And yes, I understand that money is a tool that allows for that to happen, but to me, as long as someone like most people in their 30s and especially in their 20s, like they're not at that financial place to be able to do all of those things if that's what they, you know, have like
Right.
desire for. But it's the desire, the passion, the drive to just have that, to have that. Like we see a lot of these conversations like the 50-50 talks, and I'm like, I just don't, I'm not saying I can't show up as that person, but like is the mentality that like no, like my wife will, we're going to sign documents and she's going to make sure that she contributes and pays her half. I'm like, what is this, a loving relationship, or is this a transactional, like a business transaction, you know?
Right.
Like I
Right.
just, not everyone's going to agree with that. That's just how I look at it. And then protector, same thing. Like do you want to make that person feel safe? Do you want to make them feel secure? Do you want to make them feel like if something happens, you've got it, right? Like you've got her back in any situation, or their back if it's your kids too, whatever the situation might be. Um, and so to me, that is some of the like healthy masculinity traits. Like that's more of a doing behavior or whatever. But as we discussed earlier, it's also the sitting in his high and his self-worth, being clear, confident on like who he is, or working on it, working toward it, right?
Yeah.
Self growth, the desire for self growth, the desire for self betterment. You know, like if you realize as a man that like you're not always aligning because you feel like women are too emotional or too needy or too like whatever, like where is that showing up for you? Like, or how is that showing up for you? How is that perfectly designed for you? Maybe emotional intelligence is something that you get to work on, right? Like healthy emotional intelligence, healthy emotional relationship with yourself, also something that I seek. Um, so those are just a couple of things. Um, and I'd have to think on it a little bit longer to like deep dive into a couple other things because it really is subjective, and we could go into this forever. I mean, I could talk about like communication skills. I could talk about
Yeah.
like understanding love languages. I could talk about like you know, how you're showing up in your day to day, like how you do one things, how you do everything, and like how you're showing up as a man in your workplace and, you know, at the gym, and what does your discipline look like. I really could go into this but for a while. But anyway, those are kind of like some of the basics for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And like you said, it's a subjective thing, and like the woman right next to you could think completely different, and probably the opposite of what you think. Like you, the gym. I don't like gym bros, right? Like that kind of thing. Um, Deeper question. Where do you think these desires or um, I guess qualities that you like came from.
Mm,
And the reason I ask is I was speaking to a friend yesterday, and um, you know, I I was like, "What do you like in a woman?" Right? Like, and he named off a bunch of stuff, and obviously in the beginning it's for guys, physical, right? And then so I was just like, okay, like where did that come from? And it's like, oh yeah, like Friends, we always talk about physical first, and then like movies, like every fucking, hero is always going after like the hot girl or whatever, right? And so it's like pervasive. And then again in social media, right? It's just like all the successful guys are always like wanting some hot chick, right? So it's like, um, and then you get deeper, right after that. Then you're like,
mm.
okay, then like, what do I like in a woman, Um, and so like, where did your belief of like what you like come from?
Yeah. Yeah, so I've actually thought about this a lot, and I think there's gonna be studies that come out when in a little bit here about the impact that um pop culture and specifically like TV series have had specifically on millennials. Like this it really started to become a thing, when we were younger, and
Yeah,
then has become obviously what it's become.
yeah,
So I think back to some of those shows and I feel like stuff had literally imprinted on me. So it's a
mhm,
kind of a weird answer because when you first
mhm,
asked, I was like, oh, my parents,
yeah,
right? But then I'm
yeah,
like, like in some ways, my stepdad was typical provider.
yeah,
My father was typical protector, in some ways. But like big dude, not scared of shit. Like no one messes with him. He's literally
yeah.
in construction and like people have pulled guns and he just, he like slaps it off and flicks it out of their hands kind of dude,
Wow,
like
wow, 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 yeah.
um just this is the guy that, was like, oh, you broke your ankle, stick it in ice for for a week, you'll be fine, so is that the best example? Unclear. Um but so those were some examples, but neither of them are the men that I look for
Right.
now. So yeah, so then I go to, okay, well, like what TV shows like imprinted on me, right? Like Law and Order SVU. You've got Elliot Stabler, the epitome of protector, right?
Yeah.
Like he was daddy. He was like savior. I was
Daddy.
13 years old watching,
Yeah.
yeah. It was like a kid watching that show, watching this
Yeah.
like, and now as an older person watching it and I'm like, oh, daddy, like, holy shit, Um and then the Vampire Diaries, and then you've got the bad boys, but really the bad boy actually was the one that was like, I don't know if you ever watched it, but Damon is one of the brothers in the show,
Yeah.
and
I watched True
he's
Blood. I didn't watch Vampire
also that
Diaries.
True Blood was one of them too. It
So.
definitely is where like the BDSM interest came in for sure.
Yeah.
That fucked me all the way up.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so Damon Salvatore is one of the brothers, and you have Stefan who's like the good guy, and then Damon who's like the bad brother. But over the course of the series, as with a lot of the books that we read as women, about like fantasy romance, the guy that like the broody guy that like seems like an evil piece of shit is
Yeah.
actually the one that's like more loyal, would die for her, like it worships her, like will do anything to like make it's always all even the stuff that like looked kind of, so it's interesting because obviously I think pop culture does have an impact on those things.
Right.
But then so it's maybe like what you initially look for, definitely like some of those. I'm thinking now like I'm like Sons of Anarchy, you've got Jax Teller,
Yeah.
you've got Jon Snow, from
Game of
Game of
Thrones.
Thrones. Yeah. Yep.
Daenerys. Can't
And
forget.
these are fake. These are, oh, yeah, exactly. Thank you. And the best compliment of my life. And of course these are fictional characters, but then you start to like associate those things with the people that you date. And
Yeah.
so you start to create this love map of it's combining all of it. your personal experiences, maybe some pop culture references to men from the books you're reading, which are like
Yeah.
not real, but
Yeah.
crossed over with the traits you're looking for in a partner.
Yeah.
And I've just known as time has gone on, those things that I just expressed to you that I like, I've found those in partners and it does exist. And finding the balance is of someone who's like in their masculine, but also balanced in a way where they're still in touch with their emotions and they're able to have communicate about feelings and they're able to talk, share with you how they feel about you and be affectionate with you like that it exists. Um, and I started in my 20s, like that ex I shared the story with earlier. He wasn't able to show up in those emotional ways at the time all the time, but he was trying. And the underlying thing with him was he was so honorable. He was such a good person. He did have that drive, that vision that I'm talking about, like that
Yeah.
direction, or he was working on it. Um, he the honor thing. And he was not so much your typical like protector provider at that point in time toward me, but he still had those qualities. Like he was still like diehard loyal, like towards his family. I could see it. And I was raised Sicilian, so those cultural things were very important to me. He was raised in a Mexican household, very similar cultures in this regard. Whereas like you would do anything for your family no matter what. He would kill for those people. And he would do, one of his main goals in life and still is like to be able to provide for his mother, like
Mm.
everything that she ever needs so she never has to work again. Um, so he wasn't showing up that way for me at the time because he was just not showing up that way in romantic love. But I saw those traits in him. And I'm actually just realizing that as I'm sharing this with you. So, yeah, a combination of real life, um, the men that I know in my life, whether it's my family members, you know, my friends, like,
Yeah.
as beautiful examples, the spouses that my female friends have married and are in these beautiful, loving relationships, and then a little bit of Law and Order SVU.
Got it. Yeah, it's like a beautiful amalgamation of like fantasy plus real life, and
Good
you can
word. Let me
pick
write
and
that one
choose.
down. Amalgamation.
um, yeah. Wow, what a freaking conversation. I really really appreciate your time. This is fucking amazing. I have to have you on again. There's so many more questions I have for you, but I can't express how much you've affected me today, and yeah, this is
Thank you for
amazing.
me.
I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
no, of course. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And you know me, I can yap all day long, so I'm gonna be more than happy to come back and do that for you in the future
For sure. And excited for your podcast as well.
sometime. Yeah, yeah, I might have to incorporate the word yapping in that actually.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So with that, we're signing off. This is the first episode of Mantegrity. That's not going to be part of it. Oh, yeah.